Hi everyone, welcome back to Switchup and to our review of FIFA Oh, hang on, it's FC EA 24, something like that?
Close enough. EA Sports FC 24, yeah. So this is going to be very much a performance-centric review. We're going to look at the performance, of course, and we're going to look at some of the features to see what it includes, so give you an idea of what you're getting. So how does EA FC 24 hold up? Well, let's find out.
Alright, let's jump in right at the deep end then. Now we have seen the Frostbite engine. It was used previously in another of EA's titles, Plants vs Zombies Battle for Neighborville, and we haven't really seen it since, and they went back to using the old engine for the previous games, the legacy titles for this series.
That's right. So in terms of the history of FIFA on the Switch, you had FIFA 18, you had FIFA 19, which was a new improved version, and every one since that point has been a legacy edition.
So how does it perform then? Well, it's a mix, isn't it? When we go to the overview gameplay, so this is what you're seeing when you're actually playing the game, you're looking at 30 frames per second locked out, which is quite admirable. The visual quality from this perspective is fine. I do see potentially some dynamic resolution scaling, but it doesn't look like they've used heavy anti-aliasing, so you will see some jaggy edges on the outsides of objects, but I think that's so they can keep the visual quality. When you zoom in though, and you have those cutscenes, what they've done is upped the overall image quality so that you can see the details of players' faces. You'll just notice much more detail overall, but at the cost of some of that frame rate. It seems to run between 24 and 26 frames per second during these scenes. Now that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but because of the way they use the camera, they try to create some form of realistic camera shake, don't they, Glenn? And that can look a bit odd at those lower frame rates.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a bit susceptible, I think, to frame drops in particular, and it did make me feel a bit odd at times watching some of the replays for goals, say, for example. What I will say is that, I mean, you're spot on in what you say, that drop is noticeable, but the improvement in terms of the player models is pretty significant if you compare it to some of the other Switch versions I'm talking about, of course. So it is a payoff. You know, you do get that drop from gameplay into in-game cutscenes, but the models do look better than I've ever seen them on the Switch. You lose that kind of the dead eyes, you know, the lifeless, soulless eyes that we had before. There's definitely some more life in the expression.
Absolutely. Now, when you're in motion, things, as I say, look good when you're playing. When you're zoomed in, we did notice a few graphical anomalies. There's a little bit of shimmering. You will see sometimes some clipping, so a player's hand might clip through another player's shirt. You might also see some slight shimmering in the crowd, and maybe some of those pop in and out. But as we say, compared to previous ones, it's so much better. But undoubtedly, someone will have the two games running side by side and they'll say the Switch version looks terrible. But if you're a fan of the FIFA series on Switch, this is a big step up.
Absolutely. In terms of handheld, which I've played a few matches in, I mean, for the most part, things run well. I will say that there was a noticeable showing of popping in terms of things like advertising boardings, crowd at times as well, which was worse than when playing in docked, although it is noticeable there too at times. And there was a little bit of stutter when transitioning from real gameplay into in-game cutscenes.
One of the most important aspects is input latency, and I noticed that to be very good. Characters are responsive, it feels good on Switch, and that's certainly not an issue. It doesn't feel like they've introduced any VSync, which would obviously add more latency into things. But then there are also a ton of accessibility options. You can tweak just about everything when it comes to the Switch version now.
And just finally, on controls, you can also use the split joycon method, which is always good to know on the Switch. It's one of the reasons some people prefer the Switch over other consoles.
One area that I didn't notice as being an issue were the load times. Now, load times in these games can be significant, but I didn't notice, which is a good sign. The final aspect then in terms of visuals and performance is the audio. It sounds like they've brought the audio across in a very decent fashion. Now, obviously there's full commentary here and that remains intact. The quality of that is high and it does have the soundtrack that you'll find in all other versions.
Yeah, whilst the audio clarity is very good, I'll give you that, and the music is, as you say, licensed tracks as per usual, I don't think the standard of the commentary in some instances is as good as it has been in some of the previous editions. It may differ from continent to continent, but in this European version, Guy Mowbray in particular is very wooden. Let's have a quick look at the loss of license in terms of how that affects the game and the package that you're getting. So of course we've gone from FIFA to EA FC, as it's now called. Now, for the most part, most of the major leagues and teams are present, including players, of course, badges, stadiums, and what have you. There are a few exceptions. For example, in Italy, in Serie A, I noticed Atalanta and Lazio, I believe it was, use unofficial badges and club names. But this is not necessarily a new thing. That's more of an individual licensing thing rather than the loss of the FIFA name. The big one is because of the loss of the FIFA name, there is no World Cup. Being a FIFA endorsed tournament, obviously that's not in here. Now obviously there isn't a World Cup this year anyway, so I didn't expect there to be an official World Cup tournament within this game as it was. However, there's not any sort of international tournament at all, not even a nondescript one, so I don't know if that's got anything to do with the licensing. There is an unofficial tournament in there for the women's, but not for the men, so I don't know. There is a custom tournament mode, so I suppose you could make your own, but that seems to be the biggest loss.
Yeah, the game does have differences as well from the previous versions on other platforms. The big omission from the Switch was always the journey mode, which was almost a story aspect, and that seems to be gone just across all the versions.
Across the board, yeah, absolutely. In terms of what is missing for this Switch version compared to the other versions on other consoles, as far as we can see at least, the major one is crossplay. Yeah, crossplay seems to be absent from this Switch version. What you do have instead is a Switch exclusive LAN mode. So obviously you need two consoles, but you can play with another person in LAN.
I can see the reasoning for that. Obviously with the drop in performance compared to those other platforms, it would put you at a disadvantage, and you will still be able to play online against other Switch players.
If we look at some of the game modes then, let's start with Ultimate Team. Now, the Ultimate Team that's been included in the previous Switch versions has been a watered down version to some degree. Things like the daily challenges were missing, which meant it was harder to accumulate coins, therefore harder to get the players you wanted. Again, according to EA this time, this is the full Ultimate Team experience. Another new addition that it does include is that of play styles. So this looks to transfer real life on-pitch abilities of certain players into EA FC 24, and you will see an icon shown on those players' screens, which means they have particular abilities. It could be they're good at dribbling, heading, tackling, for example, and these will then be displayed in their in-game models and the way they play the game as you play as them. On top of this, it also includes career mode once again, and has the new feature called Tactical Vision, which allows you to shape a club in the way that you want to in terms of your philosophy of play. And I haven't got as far to see this yet, but it also includes, I've been told, new cutscenes in career mode, such as Ballon d'Or ceremonies, so you can really feel like a winner if you manage to do as well as that. Now in terms of value, it will cost you £54.99 on the eShop, or your regional equivalent of course. Now I picked up the physical version, which I did get for cheaper than that, and no doubt it will drop further still in the coming months. What you should know though, if you are buying it physically, is it does have a mandatory 20GB download, so kind of negates the point, I guess. Just be aware if you're buying it physically, that's gonna sting in terms of your system storage.
So just to recap as well, we do have 1 to 4 player offline on one Nintendo Switch. There's the 2-player LAN mode that Glen mentioned, and online will allow you to play with up to 22 others in a tournament. And if you don't buy it physically, you're looking at a 28GB download. Oof.
All that being said though, I've very much enjoyed my time with it so far. It's a lot of fun. It's nice to have a full fat version of FIFA, or whatever you want to call it, on the Switch. The Frostbite engine definitely makes a difference. It's nice to be on par with the other versions in terms of that at least, and it's also nice to have the full version of Ultimate Team.
Fantastic stuff. This is a good sign if you ask me. I don't see them putting this amount of effort in right at the last potential 6 months of a console's life, and it points at least potentially at some backwards compatibility.
Yeah, that would make sense. Why would EA put this much effort in now unless they knew something we didn't in terms of what's coming next?
Ahead, and it's in. It's no longer goalless. There's the opener.
EA FC 24 gets a Switchup score of 80%.
Thanks so much for watching. Do let us know if you've got any questions down below. I'm sure Glen will be able to answer some of them. And as always, just a big thanks to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content. If you want to save yourself 10% on this game, you can use code SWITCHUP over at switchup.gg to get a little bit of money off your eShop credit. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch Up. Cheers guys. See ya!